I'm from Sydney and living in Cronulla, and I'd been with my partner for 8 years. And we were having some trouble in our relationship. And I got a text message on my phone one morning when I'd stayed at my girlfriend's place one Sunday night. And the text message was really strange and very odd to me. So my girlfriend Jodie, she was the best friend I've ever had. She said to me, "Come on, Kazza, jump in the car. We're going to go around to your house." And we lived 5 minutes away. I just stayed at her house that night. We passed an ambulance on the way to my house, and my partner Greg had committed suicide. He gassed himself in his car on the Sunday night of the 14th of October 2001. I roll up into my driveway and I'm met by a police officer who says to me, "Are you Carren Smith?" And I said, "I am. What's happened?" And he said, "Carren, Greg committed suicide last night, and the only way that we knew was that your neighbour's father committed suicide exactly the same way. And he heard Greg start his car at 8 p.m. and it was still running at 8 a.m. the next morning, and so he put 2 and 2 together." Now I fell to my knees because I am just like you. I'm just a kid inside. Feels like there's a 7-year-old inside of me. There's nothing adult about me, and you can probably tell, but there's nothing adult about me, and I'm just like you. So I fell to my knees and I didn't know what to do with that. How do you live with that? And the police officer handed me Kylie Minogue's CD, "Can't Get You Out of My Head." Do you guys remember that song? Greg had that set to repeat in his car during the process of him taking his life. And it takes about 15 minutes to take your life in that manner. So he was thinking of me the whole time. And I reread his suicide message where he said he was sorry that he wasn't enough for me. And he was sorry that he couldn't be there for me, but that he would be watching over me all the time. And he said he was sorry that he wasn't the right person for me. And our relationship was struggling, make no mistake about it, but I had no idea that that's what he was thinking. You know, in my mind, Greg was this tower of strength. He was the kind of guy that if he didn't like you, man, you knew it, like straight away. And I didn't have the courage to be that kind of person. And he was strong and he was so handsome. And I never thought that he would be the one that would take his life. It just didn't occur to me that that would be a possibility. But what that did was plummet me into the depths of depression and the depths of despair, where I had to live with the guilt of knowing that he had taken his life because of me. So as the weeks and the days went on, I became more and more depressed and more disassociated from reality. So much so that the thought of taking my own life was the only thing that actually made sense to me. I had no comprehension that I'd be putting my family through the same thing that I was going through. All I was looking for was a way out. And we know through our studies around suicide is when pain exceeds the ability to cope, the person vacates the room. And I had vacated the room well and truly. It was beyond my ability to cope. And 12 months rolled around and I'd made a decision for myself. I couldn't stand the sight of myself. I couldn't stand who I was. I couldn't stand what I'd done. So I made a decision that on his anniversary, on the 14th of October 2002, I would take my own life and I would end it all and I would pay my price for what I had done to him and his family. And I would exit the life of my family who were watching the living dead walking around. And finally, I'd be back in my rightful place with Greg, which was the only thing that made sense. So on the 12th of October 2002, I boarded a plane to Bali, which was where I had my sinister plans all laid out. And my 2 girlfriends, Jodie and another girlfriend, Charmaine, decided to join us. And if that date's ringing a bell for those of you who haven't heard me speak before, that's the date of the 2002 Bali bombing. That night we were in the Sari Club. The bomb went off at 11:30. I was blown backwards into a pit, and Jodie and Charmaine were blown forwards into the bar, where there were 4 gas tanks that subsequently exploded, which was why nobody stood a chance at the front of the Sari Club. The only reason I survived was because all of the bodies landed on top of me. And when I came to, I woke up with hands across my face, feet and legs across my body, and no one was moving. I heard a voice in my head telling me that I needed to get out, so I managed to get myself out and onto the street. And when I got onto the street, I was rescued. I tell you, I'd been in Bali for about 3 or 4 hours, and a big fat Australian guy on a moped named Jeff Smithers pulls up. "G'day, doll. Look, you're in a bit of strife. You're going to need to get on the back of me moped." and I reckon I'll take you to the local hospital. And I can tell you now, the Aussie yobbo went from there to there, in my estimation. He was amazing. I wrapped my arms around his big beer belly and he took me to the hospital. He dodged traffic. He was up and down gutters. He was amazing. Finally got me to the local hospital where they laid me out and inserted 6 strips in my arms because I'd lost a fair amount of blood, because what I didn't realise was the entire left side of my skull was completely crushed in. And I had no idea. There was no pain. They cleaned out the wound and I received 38 staples from here to here with no anaesthetic. I never felt a thing. For those of you guys who are feeling like you're going to gag, I never felt a thing. But I heard it. As each one went through. So I still cringe at the thought of it. And another Australian guy, Phil Morgan, picked me up off the table with his big, he had one of those blue trucky singlets on, like also very Australian. And this blue trucky singlet, and he was part of the Australian Federal Police that was there on holidays, and all of a sudden he was kicked into high gear to save us all. And thanks to him and the efforts of a whole bunch of other people, I managed to board a plane to fly home to Sydney that night. The hospital had told me, this was 7 a.m. in the morning, the hospital had told me I had 6 hours to live because of the nature of the head injury that I'd had. Now, I shared 8 needles with 6 people that day in Bali because they just didn't have any idea how to handle all of that. But I had something inside of me that was bigger than the situation that I was in. And there was something inside of me that had me know that if I trusted myself, that I would be okay. But if I trusted someone else, I couldn't know the outcome. Does that make sense? So I made the decision that I wouldn't be operated on, regardless of their threats that I'd be dead in 6 hours. And that was at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I should have been gone. By 10:30 that night, I'd boarded a flight in Bali, so I was still alive, and then I flew for 6 hours, landed in Sydney, and then I was operated on for 8 hours. So very miraculous. And they gave me Disprin to keep me alive on the plane, which I thought was really considerate. But you know, the real power in the story, or the real power in that experience, was that, you know, it was about 6 or so years later that I was having a moment. I'd lost my dog Dolly, and I rang my dad and I said to him, Father, I said, I just don't know what to do anymore. I said, Dolly's dead. I'd had her for 15 years. She was my little fluffy munchkin face. And I said, and I just don't know what to do. And my dad calls me Buffy. I know it's being recorded and it's out there now. So my dad calls me Buffy, and I was 36, and he says, come sit on Daddy's lap, Daddy, tell you a story. Yes, Daddy, tell you. I've got the best dad in the world. And he said, Buffy, think of the humble little caterpillar. He goes about life thinking he's awesome because he can bulldoze over a blade of grass. And he said, but life occurs and instinct takes over, and he begins to spin his chrysalis. And inside of that chrysalis, he's transforming, and his life is hell, and he's wondering he never signed up for this at all. But inside of that chrysalis, as he's transformed, that there is not the fight of his life. My dad said to me, Buffy, you're the same. He said, going through Bali and going through Greg's suicide, that's not the fight of your life. If you think that's it, you're wrong. He said, the fight of your life is becoming extraordinary because of it. And he said, and it's kind of like that butterfly. No one can help it. No one can cut the chrysalis, and no one can make it easier for him, because as soon as they do, he'll lose the strength in his wings and he won't be able to catch the wind underneath them and see the world from a different perspective. Did my dad nail it? Oh, shut the front door. You know, it was exactly what I needed to hear at exactly the right time. But sometimes you just get those stories, and my dad totally nailed it. It was enough to completely shift my mindset to really thinking about, hang on a second, what if I survived for a reason? And the reason was so that I could be the most beautiful butterfly that I'm capable of being. And what if I'm supposed to see the world from a different vantage point? Maybe that's why I survived. I went there to take my life, but I was the only one who came home.